If you want to read more, but you feel like you just don't have the time, this video will help you. Back in 2015, I decided to set what I thought was an aggressive goal for myself, which was to read 52 books that year. That equaled out to about 1 book per week. I had young kids at the time, and before that, I really just wasn't in the habit of reading consistently. Even though back when I was a kid, I read all the time. And I actually hit the goal, but it was harder than I thought it would be because I had not been in the habit of reading. And so in the years since then, I have continued to make that my goal. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 10 tricks that I've used in order to get myself to read more books. So tip number 1 is to always have a stash of books on hand. And right now you might be in a position where you have no books lying around. That's the case for a lot of people. Even if your budget is really tight, that is not going to prevent you from kind of starting to build your library. First of all, you can do it for free in a lot of different ways. You can find free books at the library, or at a lot of times like thrift stores will just have them for free. And people give away books all the time on Facebook Marketplace. But if you have a little bit of space in your budget, you can shell out, 50 cents to $1 at most thrift stores and get books. And if ebooks are your thing, they're not personally my favorite way to read, but if you like ebooks, you can find free ones on Kindle as well. So you can start amassing just a library so that you always have things available to read. Tip number 2 is to always have your book handy. For example, make sure you have it in your purse, or take it with you to the bathroom, or put it in your car when you get ready to go somewhere, assuming you're the passenger, and put it next to your bedside to read, especially if it's fiction and you have a hard time going to sleep. You'd be surprised how often you'll be able to get through a book simply by just having it with you all the time. Which leads me to tip number 3, and that is to read in snatches. Now, this is especially helpful when you have small kids and you just can't devote a big block of time to reading. The thing is, it doesn't really take that long to read a page or two. And while I love to sit down and devote long stretches of time for reading, most of the time it's just not practical. So instead, just taking a few minutes here and there can get you through a lot of books. And also, right now, if you're in a position where you kind of feel intimidated by books, it's a great idea to just set your goal to be to read a page a day. The idea here is just to start small. Tip number 4 is to have a lot of books going at once. Now, this tip may not be for everybody, but it definitely works for me. What I have found is that there are certain times of day and certain kinds of moods that I get in where I don't really want to read something heavy. Instead, I want something light. But then there are other times where I really want to read something that's more cerebral. And so it's really helpful to have several going at once, because I can usually find something I'm in the mood for. And going back to tip number 2, which was to always have them handy, if you have several going, then you can just place them in these various areas throughout your house, like your bathroom, your purse, or your book bag, or your man bag, or whatever. And that way you always have them handy and you can make progress wherever you're at. Tip number 5 is to read what you like, or at least don't try to read to impress other people. Now, of course, if the books that you tend to read don't edify you in some way, yeah, then maybe you should switch up what you're reading. But in general, if you're just trying to read a book because you think so-and-so is going to be impressed that you read a book, it's going to be really hard to read it. And it probably won't be very fulfilling in them, because probably they're not really going to be impressed that you read it in the first place. And when you enjoy what you read, you're just going to read more of it. Tip number 6 is to substitute other activities that you're currently doing for reading. I really didn't realize how much time I had been wasting before I started really getting serious about reading more. I started to see I was spending hours on social media. Now, if you're curious how you're spending your time, one simple way to do this is to look at the digital well-being app on your phone. Now, you can Google for your specific device exactly where to find it, but basically it will show you a breakdown of how much time you're spending on each app. Chances are you're spending several hours a day just scrolling on social media. So instead, you can take some of that time that you're spending and read a book instead. You can also think about maybe watching less TV or getting up a little bit earlier in order to read. Tip number 6 is to not waste your time reading books that you find out you hate. The thing is, once you start reading books again, you might fall into the sunk cost fallacy, which means, you start a book and you've spent about, 30 to 45 minutes with it. Maybe you've spent an hour reading it and you realize you hate it. And the thing is, your time's too precious to waste it on a bad book. So if you find you're not enjoying it, go ahead and feel free to put it down. It's okay. Like, you can just, you're never going to get that hour back, but why spend more time on something that you're just not getting anything out of? Tip number 8 is to keep a list of reading recommendations handy so that you can either check out those books from the library or, purchase them if your budget allows it. I love to get recommendations from trusted friends and family, especially those who have given me good recommendations in the past. Also, I like to look at my favorite authors and find out who their favorite authors were. Or, if they mention a book in one of their own books, I know that that's probably, a little indication that they like that book and think something of it. And so I have found, generally speaking, that when I go and read that book, I enjoy it too. So if you do that, what ends up happening is you end up with a higher quality kind of reading list. Tip number 9 is to read in order to solve your own problems. Nonfiction books, specifically self-help books and financial books, have been super helpful to me. And because they have done that, I have seen in my own life the actual value that they bring, which means that I have stopped feeling guilty about sitting down and reading. I used to feel really guilty, like, oh, I've got to be spending my time doing something else. But what I've learned is that not only is it relaxing, of course, but also it can help you in real ways. It can actually make you money. It can save you money or make you money. And when you look at it that way, then you can kind of look at it as a thing that can help your household, that really can justify the time that you spend doing it. Tip number 10 is to set a reading goal and try to achieve it. Human beings love to pursue goals. And so if you only say to yourself, I want to read more, it's kind of vague, and you kind of won't know when you're actually doing that and when you're not, which can lead to a bit of demotivation. But if you are specific with yourself and you say, I would like to read, 10 books by the end of the year, or whatever your goal is, then you can see that you are making progress towards that. You can just make a list, on a piece of paper of the books that you've read since you set the goal. And seeing yourself move towards that goal can give you motivation, not only for that specific goal, but also for general just life motivation. And a little bonus tip here, let yourself count shorter books too. You get to decide, how long a book needs to be for it to count. But in my opinion, juvenile books count. There are lots of great little books out there. So there you have it, 10 tips that helped me read more. I hope that they help you read more because I think reading is a great thing to do. I know it's certainly made my life a whole lot better. So if you have a tip that I didn't mention, why don't you leave it in the comment section below? Help other people read more stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Allie McGee comes home from school one day to find that her little brother Pete is gone. She remembers the imaginative stories he told about a magical tree in the forsaken forest, and she immediately sets out into the woods behind her house to find him. She begins to realize his stories were true when she finds the enchanted tree and is transported to a different world, only to discover that Pete's been kidnapped by the wicked King Olshek. She must go on a dangerous journey to the land of Hinnom to get to the castle where her brother is being held captive. Will Allie be able to save her brother? Or will she too be taken prisoner in Olshek's castle?